there are a bunch of other school shootings that have taken place where there's been either armed teachers or armed resource people. Inevitably, teachers and students die before that person can get there, and they may or may not be successful. Sometimes those people get killed.
Hello, everyone. In today's episode, we'll be discussing the issue of teachers carrying firearms in schools. We'll explore Utah's recent legislation, which is House Bill 119, which allows teachers to be armed under a structured training program. We'll also discuss the implications of this law in light of recent school shootings around the nation, and the arguments for and against arming educators, and what research says about safety in our schools. I am very happy to welcome back Nancy Halden from the Gun Violence Prevention Center of Utah to talk about this and more in relation to House Bill 119. Thank you for joining us again, Nancy. It's really great to have you back.
Thank you for having me, Jacob. I'm happy to be here talking about this important subject.
Great. First, let's take a look at House Bill 119, or the Educator Protector Program, which was signed into law in May of this year by Utah Governor Spencer Cox. Now, the bill establishes a program that allows teachers to carry firearms at schools under certain conditions. The purpose of the bill, according to lawmakers and the text of the bill, is to enhance school safety. The provisions of the bill include for teachers to complete an annual classroom response training. They have a concealed carry permit for firearms, and they certify that they must meet the above requirements and intend to securely store or carry a firearm at school. Once teachers are certified and in the program, they will be required to continue participating in the annual training and follow any additional rules set by the appropriate department. Once teachers are armed, they will be required to store their firearms at school in a biometric safe located in their classrooms or office, and they must be present at the school while the firearm is stored. Firearms must be concealed unless there is an active threat. As for protections, teachers are protected from civil liability if they act in good faith and they are not grossly negligent while carrying or storing a firearm. And schools cannot be held liable for actions taken by teachers participating in the program. All information about teachers in the program is kept private and can only be accessed by specific authorities such as law enforcement and the state security chief. This law went into effect May 1st of this year, and to date, there have been no reported school shootings here in Utah. Nancy, I would like to ask, what concerns does the Gun Violence Prevention Center of Utah have regarding this bill?
Well, I think the way this bill was presented was disingenuous. Um, they made it sound like this bill was all about safety, about teachers, and we already allow teachers to conceal carry in schools in Utah. We have done that for several years. But they made it sound like this was about making sure that those teachers who do carry are storing their weapons safely, which is, I think we can all agree that if you're going to arm teachers, they should store their weapons safely, that they should have some training. Once a year is not nearly enough training for anyone who is going to be a responsible party in an active shooter situation. But once a year is better than nothing. But they make this sound like it's all about safety, when in fact it's all about removing liability from teachers and schools. Now, I was in a safety meeting right after Parkland where the school board person got up and they said, we don't want to know who's armed in our schools because we will be held liable. And so this law is all about removing liability. It's about removing liability from a teacher. Should that teacher unintentionally shoot the wrong student? And it's also about removing liability from the school boards. Once, God forbid, a school shooting happens in Utah, which Spencer Cox himself, our governor, has said it's just a matter of time before that happens here in Utah. Um, about making sure that the schools are not held liable in those situations for the loss of life that they're capitulating and saying it will happen. That will happen. We will lose school children here in Utah. To us at the Gun Violence Prevention Center, that's unacceptable. We want to make sure that that gun never reaches the school door. And once you start arming teachers, you're saying, yeah, we know that the gun is going to reach the school door. And so we're going to arm teachers. Once you accept that the gun is going to reach the school door, you're accepting that students and teachers are going to lose their lives to gun violence, and that's unacceptable.
If schools were held liable, what would happen? Who would be found at fault, or what would transpire as a result?
Well, I think you can see how this has played out in Uvalde. And I don't know that final decisions have been made, but there has been a lot of finger pointing about who's responsible for the loss of life there. And a lot of children, elementary age children, lost their lives in that school shooting. And some families want to hold somebody responsible for that loss of life. Um, is it the school's responsibility? Is it the police responsibility? I mean, we would back it up and say there's a way to keep those guns from ever reaching the school door with good policy and good laws that are not being passed in states like Utah. But in other states, they have passed them. And we'd say the responsibility lies with lawmakers who are not passing those laws.
With regards to this House Bill 119, did the GVPC meet with lawmakers during the session where it was discussed? And if they did, what were in the discussions?
So this was rushed through in the 11th hour. It was rushed through right at the end of the session. In fact, we held a press conference after it was it was rushed through at the 11th hour, and we held a press conference before the governor signed it. But they did it very quickly at the end of the session because they know that overwhelmingly, even though we do arm teachers here in Utah, students and parents, 70% of students and parents oppose arming teachers, and 80% of teachers oppose arming teachers. So this is not a popular measure.
I just wanted to ask quickly, those figures that you said.
Those are national figures. We don't have figures in Utah per se, but I think it's easy to say that a majority of teachers, a larger majority of teachers, I talk to teachers all the time at tabling events, and I have yet to find even teachers who are gun owners. I have yet to find one that says that they would carry a gun in school. I know there are a few that do, but I have not been able um, to find those teachers.
Generally speaking, killing a person is not an easy thing to do because that's generally what would probably need to happen.
Not only killing a person, but you're asking a teacher to kill a student because most often it's a student or a former student who's going to walk into that classroom.
Right. Now, in order to take down whoever it is, the person who's an active shooter, obviously the teacher, the educator has to aim at such a point where the active shooter is either immobilized or dead. And when taking that into account regarding arming teachers in the classroom and the psychological aftermath of shooting and perhaps even killing a person, from what you know, have lawmakers taken that into account when putting together House Bill 119?
I don't think they have. You know, I think they assume that this is something that teachers want to do, and I don't think they really think past the event of the mental effect that that's going to have on a teacher of taking someone's life. There is a program in Utah County. The sheriff there has a program that works with teachers that I think is a very good program, even though I oppose arming teachers. But if you're gonna arm teachers, and we do arm teachers here in Utah, I would say that this sheriff has the right idea because it recognizes that most teachers will not carry a gun, and most teachers, even gun owning teachers, will not shoot a student and would therefore not carry a gun. And this class, and it's like a 6 week module. It's not a like once a year fly by night training, and you get your sticker and you're certified. It actually says, okay, you're a teacher in an active shooter situation. Let's say you don't want to carry a gun. What can you do? Can you learn triage, which is very useful? Can you learn de-escalation techniques? And in fact, there are FBI reports that have looked at active shooter situations that say an unarmed person is much more likely to be effective in those situations than an armed person. Because if you think about it, if you've got an armed person coming in to do harm and somebody else has a gun, you've got a gunfight. Um, However, if you've got a teacher, and especially a teacher who might know that student, and a teacher who's used to in the classroom de-escalating all kinds of situations, and maybe you've trained them to de-escalate, they might actually be able to get that gun away and get that person to reconsider. So that is very useful training. Triage is very useful training. They do, find some teachers who are willing to carry, and they train them as well.
I'm curious, how would HB 19 how would this new law be enforced?
Supposedly, there is going to be one. They are going to identify one of these. I think they call them guardians, school guardians, in every school in Utah. I forget exactly. And I think they're going to be hard pressed to do this, especially in rural areas. I think they're going to be hard pressed to find someone. I think this program is going to be hard to administer and hard to keep tabs on. We've seen this with other similar efforts. There were efforts to teach gun safety in middle schools that actually passed the legislature a few years back, and they never got implemented because there simply wasn't the support from the school personnel to do it. Um, and I think this program may run into the same stumbling blocks. I think you will find some teachers that will get on board, and not, it's not just teachers, it can be anybody in the school personnel. um, but I think they may have a hard time actually carrying this out.
Is there an overseer for the program or somebody who directs it or heads it?
Yes, there will be somebody at the state who oversees that. Yes.
So, as we can probably guess, this is a highly polarizing and very politicized issue, guns in schools, or just education in general. Do bills, in your experience, or in your discussions, or from what you've seen, do bills such as House Bill 119 run the risk of politicizing education even further?
Oh yeah. Yeah. I mean, it definitely, because I was at a tabling event this weekend in Utah County, and I was talking to a gentleman who is a gun owner, and he said, I'm for arming teachers in schools. And I said, well, you know that most teachers are not for arming teachers in school. And we got into a discussion about that. But it sounds like a good thing, especially to a gun owner. right? Well, we'll just arm the teachers. But teachers, uh, if you know teachers, and I know a lot of teachers, they have their hands full. They don't need to be the school cop in addition to all the things that we already ask them to do. I mean, it's really, and it's not just the school cop either, because like I said, the level of training that you need to respond effectively in an active shooter situation, it's not a once a year training, and it's maybe not even a once a month training. You talk to police officers, and I do talk to police officers about this. Those people are highly trained and regularly trained. And you're going to ask a teacher, in addition to grading papers and behavior management and everything else, student well being, you're going to ask them to do that too. It just does not. I know it sounds easy, but it just does not. It's not. It's not easy, and I don't think it's right. And most teachers don't think it's right either.
What evidence or what have you seen in opposition to that that says that guns, the arming teachers is effective and that it does work in enhancing safety as this bill promotes?
Let's take the most recent school shooting, the one in Georgia. I'm from Georgia. It really broke my heart. So there was a very good resource officer there who responded very quickly and actually got the gun away from the kid. But already four people were dead, two teachers, two students. Are you okay with that? I'm not okay with that. There are a bunch of other school shootings that have taken place where there's been either armed teachers or armed resource people. Inevitably, teachers and students die before that person can get there, and they may or may not be successful. Sometimes those people get killed. Um, I think Parkland, there was a resource officer, and you know, I mean, how many students died there? Uh, so you are when you say, well, we're going to use this is going to be our answer, arming somebody and having somebody armed on campus. Um, you're saying we're okay with students and teachers losing their lives. And we're not okay with that. We can talk about, there are a lot of laws that you can pass that keep that gun from ever reaching the school door. We can talk about safe storage laws. We do not have a durable safe storage law here in Utah. We're very much pushing that these days. We have enough gun owners that, and, you can suggest that people um, store their guns safely. But actually, having a law makes a difference. The states that actually put some teeth behind that and say, if you didn't store that gun safely and somebody got it and killed somebody, there's going to be some liability there for you. People sit up and pay attention and actually store their guns safely, as they should. There are all kinds of great storage devices now that are fingerprint. So you can still have easy access to your gun. They're expensive. But I mean, if you think about what the loss of a life is worth, they're worth it. If you're really serious about keeping your family safe, you want to you want to lock those weapons up. So safe storage, there's red flag laws. Um, Red flag laws have, you know, probably one of the best laws in preventing school shootings, because almost always somebody knows that kid or that parent or that situation. There's always a red flag, almost always a red flag ahead of time. I think the only mass shooting that maybe wasn't true for was Las Vegas, but in all these other school shootings, people knew, and that we do have the apps, and I think the apps are helping. But even better than that, because a red flag law says there's a problem here and we're going to take that gun away until we're sure that there's not a problem there anymore. It's a law we need here in Utah. Yeah. So there are so many ways that we can keep the gun from ever reaching the school door, and we can prevent loss of life. Arming teachers is not going to prevent loss of life.
It appears that one of the things that you've been discussing, like you've been saying, red flag laws, safe storage laws, these are all, like you said, preventive measures. Whereas lawmakers passing something like HB 119 is more of a reactive. Based on your discussions with lawmakers, why have they taken a more reactive stance instead of a more preventive stance when it comes to school shooting or preventing school shootings?
Good question. Yeah. So I was actually attending virtually some sessions of a national gun violence prevention meeting that's going on in DC right now, and this morning. And one of the speakers at the very beginning said something that just really smacked me in the face. And I thought, we need to say this more and more. Gun violence is not normal. The way we live in this country and the way we have come to the amount of gun violence that we have is not normal. You can look at any other advanced country, and nobody has this issue that we have. It's not active shooter drills in schools. That's not normal. No other country does that, subjects their students to that. Dads and moms that worry that they can't keep their kids safe. That's not normal. That's not, that's living in fear of gun violence. There are people in cities in this country that live in constant fear of gun violence. That's not normal. Metal detectors and hardening of schools, having to go through metal detectors. That's not normal. And guns being the number one killer of children in our country, ages 1 to 19, the number one killer of children in the US is guns. Okay? That's not normal. But all of this has been normalized. Who has normalized this? The gun lobby. And why is that? It's because it's the way they sell guns now. They sell guns by making people afraid of gun violence. And if you're fearful and you feel like you need to protect your family, which is a normal thing, um, then more and more people are going to go out and buy guns. Guns are not a consumable product. They don't get used up. They don't really get worn out. They get passed on generation to generation. They're not going anywhere. They're not getting used up. They're not going away. Um, and the gun lobby still wants to sell more guns. How do they do that? They do that by making people afraid of gun violence and making people believe that the only way to stop gun violence is with another gun.
This is something that I asked in our last discussion, but I'm going to go ahead and ask it again. With regards to the Second Amendment, there is, we're discussing fear. There is talk and fear about guns being taken away from people. Is that the case here, or has it ever been the case, whether it's with regards to arming teachers or preventing gun violence? Is taking people's guns away um, part of the discussion?
I talk to people all the time, and I hear that obviously from gun owners and adamant gun rights people, that the government is going to come and take our guns away. And I say, do you know anybody who has had their gun taken away without cause? Now, we don't allow felons to have guns. We don't allow domestic violence abusers to have guns. There's certain categories that of people that are not allowed, mentally ill. If you have a certified mental illness, you're not allowed to have a gun. So that is people who with cause are not allowed to have guns because it keeps the rest of us safe. Okay. um, and they never can come back and say, yeah, I know somebody who's had their gun taken away. Nobody. So that again is a fear tactic used by the gun lobby, and it encourages gun owners to go out and stockpile more guns. And guess what? Cha-ching! Meanwhile, the gun industry is selling guns, which is that's the business they're in. Those guns are not consumable. They're not going away. They're just getting, we're just getting more and more guns. And the more guns you have, the more gun violence you have.
Going back to House Bill 119, we've talked a little bit about some of the support for the law. Specifically, I wanted to mention, Clark Aposhin from the Utah Shooting Sports Council, which we talked about in the last discussion.
And Clark is the Utah representative for the gun lobby. So Clark's job is to sell more guns. So you have to understand that Utah Shooting Sports Council, their job is to promote gun sales. I just want to put that in there.
Well, he told the local Fox affiliate here that arming teachers is the quote logical next step, saying that if there were a shooting, teachers are already on the scene and are the first to engage while waiting for law enforcement to arrive. Other arguments in support of the new law include arguments for enhanced safety, which we discussed, civil liability protection, and some community support, which we did discuss. Now, on the opposition side, a gentleman named Stan Holmes, who was a retired public school teacher and U.S. Army veteran, he called the concealed, I guess he took a concealed carry class. It was offered to him a few years ago, and he called it, quote, a joke, and said that after the class he took, he wasn't convinced that everyone would be, again, quote, able to handle themselves in a crisis situation. Other arguments of the new law include some previous statements about adding more guns in schools. That doesn't make them students safer, and that it makes it harder for law enforcement to respond during those types of emergencies. Again, going back to data and research, what has been presented by both supporters and opponents of the law to support their claims about safety and effectiveness in crisis situations?
It's interesting that part of this program for teachers requires training, because if you remember a few years ago, what they did was they took away the requirement for training for concealed carry here in Utah. Spencer Cox, it was the first thing he did as governor, was to sign the bill that took away the concealed carry permit requirement. So yes, the training was a joke. I did not take the training, but I know several people who took the training, and they said it was a joke. It was 4 hours. There's no live fire training. You do not have to know how to shoot a gun in order to conceal carry a gun here in Utah. You did not. So their solution, rather than making the training better, and saying, yeah, if you're going to carry a gun, and especially if you're going to conceal carry a gun, you should know how to use that. You should know about our gun laws, which are constantly changing. They change every year. You should know when you can use force against somebody and when you can't, because there are very fine lines there that most gun owners have no clue about. There were so many ways they could have made that training better, but instead of that, they threw the baby out with the bathwater. They just said, we don't need that. And so it's interesting that now here with teachers, they're saying, oh, wait a minute, maybe we do want them to train once a year. Once a year. Yeah. So again, the Utah Shooting Sports Council and the gun lobby, they are not interested in safety. I mean, they supported undoing that law that did away with all the concealed carry training requirements. They supported that. They are not, they claim to be a gun safety group. They are not. When I grew up, the NRA and the Utah Shooting Sports Council, that kind of organization, they were all about safety. That has changed.
You said you've never taken the training before, right?
No, I have not.
And but you know people, educators who have taken the training.
I do. I know people who've taken the training course here in Utah. Yeah.
Okay. Is there any way to know who designed the training?
Um, the that's a good question. I mean, you can still take the training. Most of the training went away. It was interesting because the guy who sponsored that bill, the guy from St. George who sponsored that bill, said, people are still going to take the training. The good people in Utah, the good gun owners, they're still going to go out and get trained. Those classes dried up so fast, it made your head spin. It was an entire, there was an entire segment. And one of the really sad things about that was that they had introduced a few years, I think 3 or 4 years previously, they had introduced a suicide prevention segment into that training that was seen by 3,000 gun owners in Utah per year. Gun suicide is our number one gun violence issue here in Utah. That went away. And the health department and the suicide prevention folks have been scratching their heads ever since how to reach 3,000 gun owners a year and train them on the dangers of, you know, gun ownership and suicide. Um, so, yeah, that was a very bad bill. Very bad bill.
There was a July 2023 article in Education Week that reported on a study from the University of Albany and the Rand Corporation, which found that school based police had mixed results when it came to their effectiveness, including when it came to gun violence prevention in schools. According to that article, it says that while school based police did have some success in reducing certain types of violence, like threats and physical acts, they did not prevent school shootings and may have even led to an increase in firearm related offenses because of heightened reporting. It also found that school based police disproportionately disciplines boys, black students, and students with disabilities. However, in light of the school shootings that occurred during that period, because like I said, this was in 2023, some schools did reinstate a police presence after letting them go. With relation to HB 119, how does the implementation of that law compare to the findings of the study regarding the effectiveness of school based police in preventing violence and ensuring student safety?
Yeah, I love the Rand Corporation's uh, analyses because they're very careful about they don't overstate anything and they don't understate anything. They're very thorough. So if you want to read good stuff, read Rand. Um, Basically, I would say that the discrepancy that they found in that you know presence of a gun on campus represents different people, like who has that gun and how well trained they are. Um, and we all know that in certain places, the police can be very heavy handed and maybe they're really well trained at dealing with criminal behavior, but not so much with teenagers. um, you know, and who have you got? Who has that gun? How well are they trained with that gun? And how well are they trained at interacting with the population that they're being told that they're responsible for? And so that's, if you think about that on a nationwide basis, you got everybody all over the map. So it's no surprise that the results are up and down. And let's talk a little bit, Jacob, about the effects on students, because the other population I talk to a lot, I go out at these tabling events where we collect people's comments about gun violence. We don't tell them what to say. We just give them a sheet of paper and say, tell us what your thoughts on gun violence are, and we will share those with your lawmakers here in Utah and in DC. And I get a lot of students, and they say that active shooter drills are terrifying. And I think we have a whole generation of students who have grown up with active shooter drills and and with metal detectors and with bulletproof backpacks. And you have to, in that mix, I think you have to say, what is the emotional toll on our student population of all of this? Because the message that you're sending over and over again to those students is, yeah, we're not going to be able to keep that gun from reaching the school door. And that's terrifying. If I were a student, I'd be terrified. I have a granddaughter now, terrified for her. Um, you know, she's not in school yet, but it's pretty scary. I talk to a lot of parents and they're scared to send their kids to school because we have said, yeah, that could happen. We'll arm your teacher. Hope for the best.
During school active school shootings, there have been students who have recorded these shootings on their cell phones and posted them on social media. Um, and some of that is well documented. How is that changing the discussion on guns at schools or gun violence?
Yeah, I mean, social medias are really, you know, I think I think most of the social media outlets now take those down very quickly. Obviously, that just terrifies people more. It's more information than you really need. Um, I don't think it's a good idea. I don't think that should be out there for the public, especially for children. That being said, the social media apps where people can anonymously say, "Hey, I just heard Joey say something that really alarmed me. Can somebody check on Joey?" That has turned out to be a very good thing, and I'm all for that because that kind of model is more of that needs to happen. you know and it's not that you're gonna assume the worst about Joey, but just somebody's gonna check on Joey and make sure he's okay, and see what's going on with him and what he said, and why he said it. And I think there's a lot we can do to prevent violence that is community. It's people looking out for the larger community. It's other parents, it's other students, it's teachers are you know they're they are in there. They sort of know who's doing well and who's not doing well, and they have a great capacity to use that and steer things and get people help when they need help, because there are students out there who are going through rough things. Every one of these student shooters has grown up in trauma. They have grown up in sort of unimaginable traumatic circumstances. You don't get to be a school shooter just by chance. You get there by circumstances. You get there by a lot of trauma, often a lot of bullying. There's a lot we can do in the way of community violence intervention to head that off before the disaster happens.
So HB 119 is law. It's in place. With that reality finally set in, what's next for the GVPC and for lawmakers who've been working on different legislation? What's next?
Well, we are really actively pushing for safe storage law here in Utah. We have a lot of gun owners here in Utah. A lot of them are hunters, and a lot of guns that are not safely stored and are in easy access to children and maybe young adults or even adults who are in a bad um, emotional state. And a safe storage law could go a long way to keep Utah citizens safe from gun violence. So we are working with the suicide prevention folks and and all sorts of people, all at different levels who have overlapping concern about gun violence, to say, Utah needs a safe storage law. We would love to see that happen. The gun lobby will fight against a safe storage law. Again, the gun lobby is in the business of selling guns. They're not in the business anymore of keeping us safe, sadly. So they will fight against that. But if enough people get together and say, yeah, why not? Here's an interesting fact, too, Jacob, that I learned. Because I work with in another realm with foster families. Foster families are required to lock their guns up. So it's good enough for children in foster care. Why not for all Utah children? Why would we not extend that same level of care and safety for all Utah children? Isn't that interesting?
It is. It's very interesting. I want to know, what is the opposition to safe storage laws, or what? How does Because you say the gun lobby opposes safe storage laws because it prevents them from selling more guns. How is that possible? Or what is the argument that you've heard them make in regards to that?
Yeah. Well, obviously, they don't say that it's because they want to sell more guns, right? They're not going to say that. But they say, that we are taking away gun owners' rights. It's all they will always come back and claim, well, you're infringing on people's Second Amendment rights when you say that they have to store their guns safely. You know, you're infringing on their Second Amendment rights. That's what they'll say. It makes no sense, but that's the line they use.
So we've been talking to Nancy Halden of the Gun Violence Prevention Center of Utah regarding Utah House Bill 119 and the implications of the state law allowing teachers to carry firearms in the classroom. This is not an easy topic to discuss, but I do want to thank Nancy for taking the time to be here and address this, again, highly polarizing issue.
Thank you so much for having me.